Well,
I'm
just, hey, welcome to the Atheist Experience. It's December 13th, 2020. My brother's birthday was 2 days ago, so happy birthday to my brother, who is 49, which means next year I actually have to give more of a shit than I did this year, because we like to celebrate round numbers. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing really good, actually.
Jim and I are here. I love saying Gemini every time we do this show. We are here. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. It's December 13th, as I mentioned. I want to talk and get the announcements out of the way first so we can get to your calls, because that's what everybody's really wanting to do. We've got a lot of really good calls lined up. Some of them are on repeat topics like, God and slavery, and some of them are on some new topics as well. But thank you all for watching. If you're watching us live right now, if you look above the chat, you'll see a link to the donation button up there. All the donations, 100% of them go to the Atheist Community of Austin. They don't have to pass go or anything like that. We get it all, which means if you donate $1, we got $1. And if you donate $100, we got $100. And it allows us to produce the content, not only of the Atheist Experience, but Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, Secular Sexuality, Nonprofits, etc. You can donate there. You can also get yourself some merch. You can go to bit.ly/AEN merch, and there's coffee cups and t-shirts and other things there. You can become a member on YouTube now as one of the options by clicking join for a rate per month, and you get emotes and other things out of that. Also, patreon.com/the Atheist Experience is one of the primary ways that we're working to support the show. We have two new Facebook groups that are we want to let people know about. That's the Atheist Experience fan group, which is facebook.com/groups/AXPFG. And then there's the private fan group. Ooh, and that's at AXPFG. Go over there, check those out. You can participate and chat there. Also, there's the Discord server, which I'm sure we'll see a link for a little bit later. In addition to Atheist Experience and Truth Wanted and Talk Heathen and Secular Sexuality, there's Nonprofits, which airs every Sunday between Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience, with new hosts, new segments, a lot of stuff going on. Quick note about the holiday season. There's like some special-ish holidays coming up, Christmas and New Year's, and we're going to be shut down for that week between Christmas and New Year's, but there will be new content, because between Christmas and New Year's, we'll be doing cooperative special series of fun shows featuring folks from all of our programs, doing a lot of different stuff. So stay tuned and keep an eye out for Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, Atheist Experience, Secular Sexuality, and Nonprofits. And I only know that all of that's going on, and the essentials behind what's going on for these special super secret holiday shows, because we have the best crew in the world, which actually includes Greg, who's set this all up. But there is our crew behind the scenes, managing video and audio and cat food and call screening and everything. But while I love them all, the real reason that we do this show is to interact with the callers. So, Jim, did you have any announcements or anything to hit before we get started?
No, not really.
Sweet. Well, we're going to jump right in with both feet, because the phrasing of this particular question interested me. Enoch in Pennsylvania wants to know whether or not, or why he shouldn't just believe whatever makes the most sense to him. So welcome, Enoch. You're on with Jim and Matt. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Not too bad.
Yeah.
How can we? So is that accurately your question, or is there more to it? Just why should, are you wondering why you just shouldn't believe whatever makes the most sense?
Yeah, so basically, to me personally, it just makes more sense to believe that there's a all-powerful being that created everything than to believe it happened by chance.
Well,
so
see,
we don't know, but since we don't know,
you set up a false dichotomy.
Why don't
you've set up? It makes more sense that God did it than that it all happened by chance. Well, irrespective of which of those makes sense, those aren't the only options. And maybe the right answer is to say you don't have enough information to believe that you have any good understanding of how the universe came to be. So why believe either one? You don't have to commit to something, right?
you don't have to, but I mean, it makes more sense.
Do you think it's a good idea to commit I don't have to commit to a belief on who's going to win the game. whatever game we're talking about, between team A and team B. I don't have to commit to a belief at all. Do you think it's a good idea for me to commit before I have enough information to make the decision?
No.
Then stop doing it. Then stop doing that when it comes to a God. If you admit, which you did already, that you don't have enough information to make a decision, then your position should be, I don't know whether or not there's a God. I'm not convinced there's a God because there hasn't been sufficient evidence to convince me that there's a God. And I will be convinced that there's a God as soon as there is sufficient evidence.
Right. And it makes the most sense to me that I should believe that I have $1 million in my bank account. Should I run around and act as if I have $1 million in my bank account? Or will that lead me into seriously negative consequences?
Actually.
Okay,
Pardon?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, I don't think it can't be proven, but I just think it seems like it's more likely that that's the case.
How did you determine that it's more likely? How did you determine that it's more likely God than something other than God?
Because it doesn't make sense that the universe could come about on its own.
Who said the universe came about at all, or that it came about on its own? The issue is, did a God do it? And you just say, that makes more sense. But when I ask you why it makes more sense, your answer is because it doesn't make sense for something else to have happened. What reason do you have to think that the best explanation for existence is that there's a God?
It just, things can't come about by themselves.
Prove that. How do you know that?
We've never seen it happen before.
Okay.
Actually, that's not correct. We have at the quantum level.
Have we ever seen a God before? Have we ever seen a God do anything? Because you just defeated your own argument in the same way that we haven't seen something come from nothing or something create itself in the limited scope that you're talking about. We also haven't seen a God do anything. So that means that you shouldn't believe that there's a God, right? What's wrong with just saying you don't know? Why is it that you're so desperate to say, and by the way, every time you address this question, you do a false dichotomy. You say it's either God or it happened by chance. It's either God or it created itself. There may be an explanation for the origin of the universe that is neither the simplistic created itself nor God did it, right? There are other options that maybe you don't know about, right?
True, yeah.
Okay, so why are you so desperate to make a decision now when you admit that you don't have good reason or evidence to support the conclusion you're reaching?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm so desperate per se. It's just, it seems like it's...
Do you care whether or not your beliefs are likely to be true?
Yes.
Then you should, when somebody says, do you believe there's a God? Your answer should be, I don't know. Because that's the truth.
Okay.
I mean, if you care about whether your beliefs are true, you can't just go, well, this is what makes the most sense to me. And here's the defeater for this really quickly. Once upon a time, it made really good sense to people that lightning came from Zeus. Do we think lightning comes from Zeus now?
No, because we have a better explanation.
Yeah, because we have a better explanation. But all those people who believed all those for all those years, they would be sitting around going, why shouldn't I just believe what makes the most sense to me? It makes the most sense to me that Zeus is there. And the answer is because you don't have enough reason to reach that conclusion, and you could be wrong. And if you are convinced of something and you're wrong, how much time are you going to spend looking for the right answer? Because you don't think you're wrong.
I would still look for, if more evidence comes in or whatever, and we have different, I'm still going to look for other options if they present themselves.
Okay, well, right now, the best empirical evidence that exists, matter of fact, all of the available empirical evidence suggests that there's no evidence that a God created anything or that a God was required to create anything.
Okay. Well, that basically answers my question.
Okie doke.
Okay.
Thanks for calling, Enoch.
All right, thank you. Yep.
And the something from nothing doesn't quite work at the quantum level, because we do see particles come into existence without cause, and from basically nothing.
And I completely disagree with and reject that. I think the description is that we see particles doing things that we don't have an explanation for. The ex nihilo, something from nothing, there's no nothing. You can't act on a nothing. Nothing can't, there's nothing. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other interesting topic is the definition of nothing. The physicists don't really have one that does not include the quantum. I hate to use the word quantum world, but I'm a piker, so I'll use it.
Yeah.
And I'll let the quantum physicist scream about it. But yeah, it's just a lot of that stuff starts to go away when you start getting into some of the quantum mechanics. So yeah,
cool. It's a little complicated, but I'm gonna stay away from it largely. But we've got a ton of callers. So we've got Connor here in Texas, who, when I read this, I'm a little confused, because Connor seems to be suggesting he can debunk atheism when atheism doesn't make a positive statement, so there's no way to debunk it, and says that atheism is no more than a religion based on blind assumptions. Subjective reality is evidence for God. Wow. Hey, Connor.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get started.
All right. Awesome, man. I'm glad to be here. So,
okay.
Where would you like me to begin?
I don't know.
The beginning.
What is your so?
Well,
I tell you what. Why don't you define atheism?
Okay, cool. And I very well might be wrong, because it is a path that I was only down for a very short period of time. But I would define atheism as simply not believing in God, right? The belief.
Cool.
Assumption that.
Cool. We're at now. Now here's the thing. Let me change that to not collecting stamps. Would you ever call in to a show and say that you can debunk non-stamp collecting?
Non-stamp collecting.
Yeah, like could you debunk? Let's call someone who doesn't collect stamps a no stampist. Would you call into their show and say that you can debunk no stampism?
Well, yeah, all I'd have to do is stamp. I would just have to experience stamping, and that debunks.
No. They don't collect stamps, and you claim that you can debunk that. How can you debunk someone who does not believe something, who does not do something?
Oh no, I'm not debunking that they do not collect stamps. I could just debunk that stamp collecting does not exist, right? But
that's not what they believe. That's not what I said. So this is about whether or not they believe. This is about what their hobby is. I'm not talking about a belief in this sense. So when you say atheism is no more than a religion, when we define religions, religions have tenets and instructions and guides and a worldview and leaders and organization. None of that exists within atheism, right?
I see. I mean, you guys do have leaders. You guys.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
No,
we don't. No, we don't.
No.
That's not what there's no leader of atheism. Not like a pope or a priest or
a leader.
I'm not a leader of atheism.
Like leader. Okay.
Trust me,
I'm talking about. So when you say that atheism is a religion, what do you mean?
Okay, yeah, and again, I might have a different definition of a religion. I simply see religion as a set of thoughts and beliefs about divinity, right?
But atheism, as you've defined it, is someone who doesn't believe in a God. That's not a set of thoughts and beliefs about divinity. That's someone who is not convinced.
Right, but that is a thought about divinity. You could not.
Oh my God! Then everything is a fucking religion. What a useless definition.
Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, if you're studying.
Now, hang on. It also says in your call screener thing that you're saying it's a religion based on blind assumptions. But if atheism, as you define it, is not believing in God, what's the blind assumption?
The blind assumption that you're making is that we are living in a material, objective reality, and that there is something outside of direct experience. So, for example, when you close your eyes, I still exist, right? When you close your eyes, your environment still exists, right?
That assumption, that I am experiencing a reality isn't a part of atheism. That is, everybody makes that assumption.
Well, no. It's not the assumption that you're experiencing reality. You're experiencing reality. That's the truth. You're making the assumption that we're living in an objective physical world, right? That's made of matter at its base. Okay.
I have evidence. I have evidence that we exist in a material world. Now,
I have evidence that we do not.
Well, then stop saying it's an assumption, because so what is the blind assumption that atheism is based on? Hang on. Let's try this one more. Let's try this one more time. You say a God exists. I say I'm not convinced. We have defined atheism as someone who is not convinced a God exists. There's no blind assumption required to not be convinced. You start off not convinced, right?
No, that is the falsehood.
No, that's bullshit. You start off not convinced because at the beginning of your life, you cannot even process a concept, which means you cannot have a concept, right?
No, this is the thing. Concepts are what are actually holding you back from realizing the divinity of experience.
Answer the question. Don't go off on it. Can a baby that's just been born conceive of a God?
Yes.
No, they can't. We know this from how brains work, that is not possible.
Okay, then give me your definition of God.
I don't have a definition of God. I react to everyone else's definitions of God. They define a God, and I am either convinced that God exists, or I am not convinced that God exists. It would be stupid and dishonest argument for me to set up a God and knock it down. That's a straw man. You're the one that needs to define the God that you believe in, and then either we're convinced or we're not.
Then why don't you listen to my definition of God and see if...
I'm happy to listen to your definition of God. What we were talking about was whether or not a baby that's just been born can conceive of a God. And what we know from neuroscience is that that's not possible, and you're saying it is.
Do you not see what you're doing? In my definition of a God, a baby can. You are creating a definition of a God.
So
you are saying
no.
But
Connor. No. So you can sit here and define a God all day long and say that your definition of a God means that babies can conceive of things, and what it proves is that your definition of God is wrong and not attached to reality, because babies can't conceive of God.
You're trapping yourself in a giant contradiction. You don't even know what my definition of God is, yet you're denying it.
If your definition of God is based on babies can understand it, and we have evidence that says that babies can't understand it, then your definition of God is automatically flawed before we get out of the gate.
Yeah. If your definition of God was my God, because my God exists, means that Matt has a vagina, I don't need to know anything more about your God. It's false, because I don't. And if your God is one that you think that babies can understand God, we know that's not true either. So I don't need to hear all of your definition of God, because you already broke it by claiming something that isn't true.
No. By you saying that babies cannot understand God, you are creating a definition of God.
No, I'm not.
No.
I'm saying babies can't understand concepts. Zero concepts, no concepts. They don't understand God. They don't understand you. They don't understand arguments. They don't understand genitalia. They don't understand what food is. They cannot conceive. That's not the way brains work.
Issue. You think that God is a concept when it is not. God is
no.
God
Connor, listen. Babies don't understand the concept of a horse. The concept of a horse is independent of whether a horse exists or not. Babies cannot conceive of a God. I did not say that proves that God doesn't exist. I didn't say it had anything to do with whether or not a God exists. Babies don't have the ability to process concepts.
I understand that, but what I'm telling you is that
you understand. No. You just said that babies. You understand that babies can't understand concepts, and a minute ago you said they could.
No, I did not. I said they could understand God. God is not a concept.
Okay, we're done, Connor. Because all understanding is conceptual. If they can't understand the concept of God, then there is no comprehension of the actual God. Just like if I can't understand the concept of a horse, I don't understand a horse.
Right. And
All right.
peekaboo works because babies don't have object permanence. So if they can't see it, they can't touch it, they can't sense it, it doesn't exist, then your God definitely doesn't exist to a baby.
I did not. Okay. You want to start over, Connor? You want to try again?
That'd be great. I'd love to.
Sure. What God do you believe in? Give me a rough ballpark definition.
So, first of all, I want to make it clear that I do not believe in a God. What I am about to tell you is not some belief system.
Goodbye, jackass. Thanks for wasting my time.
Oh,
You identified yourself as a theist, a T. That means you believe in a God of some sort. You came in and argued that babies can understand God because God isn't a concept. And now you say you don't believe in a God. Thank you for wasting everybody's time and showing what an unbelievable jackass you are, Connor. I can't get it.
Yeah.
Who waits on hold to say, I don't believe in a God, but I can debunk atheism?
Right.
And atheism is a religion based on blind assumptions about a God that I don't believe in, that I think babies conceive of, but they can't because they can conceive of, or they can understand God, but they can't understand a concept. Connor might have one of the most broken, dishonest.
Yeah. Just, I don't know. That's just way too far out there for me.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to figure out exactly where to go next. And I want to make sure that, I mean, we got so much here. Jim in the Faroe Islands. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Jim.
Hi there. Yeah, hi. Now we're on with Jim and Matt.
Yeah.
So I was, I'm from a tiny country of like 50,000 people. And it's a very religious country in general, and my family is very religious as well. And this show partly helped me get out of that, probably about 10 years ago. So I was wondering if there is a duty to challenge unfounded beliefs, like at social events, birthdays, family events, and so on. I've kind of struggled with that sometimes when there's like preaching at the dinner table, especially I'm thinking about impressionable people that are there as well, like maybe young children and stuff like that. Is there kind of a duty on me to challenge those unfounded beliefs for the benefit of them? I've kind of had that kind of struggle inside a lot of times, and I was wondering what your opinion about that is. And I have an example where I did speak up, if you want to hear that. But
I don't think there's a duty as an atheist to challenge things at a family event. I don't know. I mean, you could make a good case that as a good citizen of whatever society or country you're part of, that you might. But family events are tricky because families are tricky, right? The question is do you know, how far do you go? Do you want to keep that for your family and friends at the end of it?
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's really a duty, unlike religions from an atheist point of view, to quote unquote spread atheism. I'm on this show because I enjoy it, not because I feel like I have a duty.
Yeah, but he's talking about not just like spreading atheism, but countering unfounded belief. I would say as a humanist that you have a duty, but that duty is also mitigated by the impact that it's going to have on your life. Much the same way that if somebody's standing in this street and there's a bus coming towards them, as long as it's not putting me at risk, I think as a humanist who professes to care about other people, I have a duty to help that person avoid being hit by the bus that's coming. If it would require me putting my life at risk, it's no longer a duty, but it may in fact be virtuous. That's about as close as I can get.
Yeah, I can understand that. I often kind of, I often don't think of my own risk. I don't really care that much what people think of me, but like I love my mom, for example. She's very religious, but she's always been a wonderful mom, and I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to put her in a position of like, I don't know, getting all these questions, what's up with Jim, and just, I kind of think of other people in my family before I think of myself in that regard. And I'm putting them in an uncomfortable situation in like the community, because it's such a small country. Like 50,000 people is the country, and like everyone knows everyone. So I wouldn't want to create kind of unneeded drama. But I also think that when I grew up and I was kind of being indoctrinated into religion, I kind of wish someone spoke up around that kind of bubble. Someone was able to maybe punch a hole in that bubble sometimes. Maybe I wouldn't have struggled so much with some of those thoughts growing up.
Yeah, I get it. There are times where, for the sake of family, I'm probably going to keep my mouth shut on some things. But it depends on how egregious the thing is. Like if I'm in a family gathering and somebody's doing the, claiming, wow, I'm trying to avoid political things. The pandemic is a fiction or a fraud or a hoax or whatever, then I think I do have a duty to correct that information. But the extent of it is going to be based on its impact to your life and what you're willing to do. For me, I'm happy to tell anybody related. I don't care if someone is blood related to me. That doesn't matter at all. I want people in my life who are good people, irrespective of whether or not we're closely related by blood. And so I'm happy to tell relatives and family at an event to go fuck themselves if they have really bad ideas and they're being dangerous. But you get to make that decision for yourself. And no, I don't consider it just a blanket simplistic duty.
Yeah, I get that. Well, I wouldn't want to take up unnecessary time, but I'd love to just thank you for doing the show, and also shout out to the call screeners. They're doing an amazing job to keep this thing smooth. So
great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Mm-hmm. And now other Jim. Where do you want to go? Because we're spoiled.
I think just start at the top and work our way down through the theist callers, and then come back and pick up the atheists if we get done.
Sounds good.
We've got enough theists to do that.
So is it, I think it may be pronounced Avishai in Maryland?
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? You're on with Jim and Matt.
Yeah. Thank you. Honestly, I would just like to, would you rather me start on the whole Exodus 21 thing, or with some other fact stuff?
With some other fact, what do you wanted to achieve here?
Well, one was set straight because for like the last week I've been, what's the word, correcting the contradictions, because none of them were contradictions. And two,
whoa! I don't know what hang on. I don't know what you're talking about. You say for the last week you've been correcting contradictions and none of them were contradictions. What contradictions are you talking about?
To the Bible. My bad. To the Bible.
But okay, stop. Listen. Slow down.
Okay.
Who presented contradictions? Did I present contradictions? Did Jim present contradictions?
I've heard you all plenty of times across multiple videos say there are multiple contradictions in the Bible.
Okay. So what contradiction have I specifically claimed that you would like to debunk?
Oh no, that's not why I was calling.
Then why the fuck are we talking about that?
Okay. Would you rather me start on Exodus?
I'd rather you start on whatever you want to talk about so that we can address it.
Okay. Well, then, regarding Exodus 21, is not at all talking about slavery. If you also knew about the time of it and what was it actually talking about, and the mistranslations given through what the Catholic Church published was they brought in slavery. The Catholic Church doesn't put the word slavery in there. Well,
no, sir.
For what Exodus 21 was talking about.
No, sir. It doesn't matter what word you put on it. You can call it slave. You can call it servant. You can call it whatever you like. The Bible specifically allows you to own people as property, correct?
They're not being owned as property.
I'm sorry, what?
They're not being owned as property.
But the Bible, no. The Bible allows you and says that the people, your slaves, your servants, whatever word you want to use, that they are your property. Right?
No.
It doesn't. So you're saying the Bible doesn't say that your slaves are your property?
Are you talking about are you talking about outside of Exodus 21 or just
Leviticus 22:11 is one of several where that's where if the priest buys a soul with money. Leviticus 25:44 through 46 says the bondmen and bondmaids which you shall have shall be the heathen that surround you. Of them you shall buy bondmen and bondmaids. More of the children of the strangers that do sojourn with you, of them ye shall buy, and of the families that are with you, where they begat your land. And listen, and you shall take them as inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for a possession. They shall be your bondman forever. That's what it says in Leviticus 25. Are you telling me the Bible doesn't say that?
Wait, what the crap is this saying?
Yeah, have you never read Leviticus 25?
Well, I've read it, but
So-
I've read it in other translations, and this sounds like it's telling the priest to eat the person.
It's like telling the priest not to eat the person, actually. But so when you said the Bible doesn't say that your slaves are property, and then I point you to Leviticus 25 verses 44 through 46, where it does say they're your property.
Okay, no, you're talking about nonsense.
I'm sorry, what?
Okay, no, this is saying, okay. This is saying if a priest has slave, servant, whatever you would want to call it, that he buys.
No, that's not the verse. That's not the verse I'm talking about. Leviticus 25 verses 44.
Leviticus 25, Leviticus 22:11.
No, Leviticus 25 verses 44 through 46. You go ahead and read Leviticus 25 verses 44 through 46. You read those to me from whatever Bible you prefer.
Yeah, no, that's another mistranslation. It actually is bond servant or servant, which entails that they had a debt. They are either criminals or poor who put themselves into a criminal who had
Avishai, yes. I want you, Avishai, please stop. I want you to read to me Leviticus 25 verses 44 through 46 from whatever Bible you prefer.
Okay, this is a King James. Both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou hast shall be of the heathen that are round about you. Of them shall you buy bondmen and bondmaids. Moreover, the children of the strangers that do sojourner among you, basically those that will be accompanying you in your house or live with you. Of them shall you buy, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, and they shall be your possessions.
They shall be your what? No, wait, what? They shall be your what?
Possessions.
You just told me the Bible does not allow people to have other people as property. That's what possessions mean.
Okay. Do you not understand what mistranslation means?
You don't get to just call in and say it's a mistranslation. You can go argue with the people. But okay, continue. Read verse 46 too.
That was verse 46 and 44.
No, that was verse 45. You stopped at the end of verse 45. You don't even know your own fucking book?
Oh, my bad. You're right. And you shall take them as inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But
forever.
Okay. This is even better.
Hang on. Do you acknowledge that a plain reading of your Bible says that that you shall own bondsmen forever. They will be possessions that you can pass on to your children. You just read that. Do you acknowledge that that's what it says?
I will acknowledge that if you read it directly from Leviticus, from these just two, it will be misinterpreted.
No, sir. That's the most dishonest thing you could have said. I asked you, do you acknowledge that a plain reading of this, the Bible states that you shall own those people as your possessions that you can pass on to your children, and they will be your bondsmen forever? There's only a yes. That's a yes or no question. Do you agree that's what the Bible says?
For what Leviticus, for those three verses, then yes, I will agree with that.
Sure. So when I said that the Bible allows people to own people as property and pass that property on to their children, I was correct, right?
Now, okay, how about I clear up?
No, how about we just move on to another call? You do some investigative study so that you learn a little bit more about your Bible. And if you want to make a case later on that there's a mistranslation, you can do so.
Can I at least clarify with Exodus 21?
What about Exodus 21?
Because so it says, okay, if you go by the King James, it's saying if you buy the servant who would be either a criminal or poor who puts...
You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know that. That is a dishonest fucking lie. It specifically says that you should buy your servants from the heathen that surround you. It doesn't say that you're buying people who necessarily owe a debt. But in any case, owing a debt doesn't mean that you get to own someone as property.
Right. Okay. And later it literally says after they serve that time, they can choose to stay with you forever. They choose to stay with you forever.
No.
Leave.
Avishai.
They choose to stay with you forever. Of course, pass down to your children.
No, Avishai, you're not reading. See, Exodus 21 talks about the rules for slavery, the rules for servants, but it starts with the rules for Hebrew servants. Hebrew servants you can only keep as your servants for 7 years, and then you have to let them go, unless they decide to stay with you forever. But if you go down and scroll down a little bit further to where you're talking about slaves that aren't Hebrew slaves, it specifically says that those slaves are your property. You don't have to let them go after 7 years.
Which verse is that?
I'm sorry, I'm not here to read your entire fucking book for you. You're the one that called to tell me I was wrong. Exodus?
You're wrong, so how about you try to prove to me why I'm wrong?
Oh, all right, you little jackass. You ready? Buckle up. I've already produced an entire video on my channel about slavery that goes through it verse by verse for Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25 and more. But if you read Exodus 21 and you read what it actually says, there are rules for Hebrew servants where you can then trick your slave into becoming your slave forever. That's verses basically 1 through 7 or 1 through 6. And by the way, verse 7 is very special because it says, if a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do, which means even among Hebrews, you only had to let the men go after 7 years. You got to keep the women forever. And if she doesn't please your master who betrothed her, then she can be redeemed. But basically, we're talking about sex slaves. And then when you continue down into verse 20, if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod and he die under his hands, he shall be punished. But in verse 21, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. Exodus 21, verse 21 says that you can beat your slave, and as long as they don't die within a couple of days, there's no punishment because that slave is your property. I'm sorry that you haven't read this. I'm sorry that you've been lied to. I'm sorry that people have told you that this is all indentured servitude and we're making a big deal out of it. It's a false translation or it's a wrong translation. It's an error. But the fact of the matter is the Bible says you can own people, that there are different rules for Hebrew slaves than there are for other slaves, that you can beat them as long as they don't die within a couple of days, that they are your property that can be passed on to your children. All of this is there. What on earth does the Bible say that could convince anyone it is opposed to slavery? Why didn't Jesus correct this? This is Old Testament stuff. Why didn't Jesus show up and say, hey, all that bad information that you got out of the Old Testament about slavery, I retract all of that. Was Jesus too stupid to do that? Was he too immoral to do that? Where's the correction that says thou shalt not own another person as property? I'm sorry you don't know your book very well.
Oh, it's thoroughly. Now, well, you know what? I don't even care anymore. I'm not even going to try. But I'm just going to.
Oh, you know what?
Oh,
If you
okay.
don't care anymore and you're not going to try, you can fuck off. That's a dishonest way to end. You just got owned. Like you called in to correct me on slavery, the number one topic that I've discussed more than anything ever. And now you're like, oh, well, I don't care. I don't even believe you were real.
Yeah.
If you're an atheist and you're just calling in to try to make us look good or to demonstrate that we know the Bible better than the average caller, you don't have to do that. We don't need fake callers. We want real callers. And if somebody is able to say, here's an actual misunderstanding of the Bible, great. Anyway, let's pick one where it's not like,
Line 6.
Sure.
Okay. Is that the one you were laughing at, or was there another one?
There's another one because there's more slavery coming up. But Phillip in Australia, you're on with Jim and Matt. And
yes, hello. I'm assuming you're an atheist, Matt.
Yep.
you don't have to assume. The show's called The Atheist Experience. I'm on the board of directors for the atheist community of Austin and American Atheists. I've called myself an atheist for years. Why on earth would you assume that I'm an atheist?
Well, I barely know you, but I'll get straight onto this. So I take the position that God exists. The evidence is all around us. So I'll start with my opener of 3 sentences.
Hang on.
And you can respond.
No. First thing you need to do is define what God you're talking about, and then you can present your 3 sentences, and as long as they're not too long, and we'll respond.
We are talking God in general.
Which God?
I don't know what that means. When I ask you to define something, it's because people have different definitions of that and different usages for the term. I need to know what yours is. We just went over this in the last 2 calls ago. I'm not defining a God. You are. So you need to define the God that you believe in and then argue for it.
The creator of the universe.
What does that mean? The creator of the universe. What are its properties? Is it a thinking being? Is it an agent? Does it still exist? What?
An eternal prime mover, because every worldview has to account for the very first movement.
No, because you can say, I don't know. Now, you say an eternal prime mover.
No problem. Then hang on. You should have no problem responding to my opener. Only 3 sentences.
Phillip, why can you not give me a definition of a God?
A God is an eternal and infinite in size prime mover.
Infinite in size. How?
Matter.
Infinite in size. Is it a thinking agent?
A consciousness.
Wow. So is like English your first language? Because thinking agent, you could have just said yes, but instead you said it's a consciousness. That's what a thinking agent is.
Eternal. I'm giving you the attributes. So
well, if it's an infinite size, just real quick, if we go back to this infinite size things, how does it fit inside the universe if its size is infinite? Because you can't have 2 objects occupy the same.
It doesn't. It transcends the universe, but I don't know how it could be infinite anyway. But
all right.
So right now the properties we have are that it is eternal, infinite in size. Yeah, and it's a consciousness.
God of the Bible. Look, we'll discuss the God of the Bible, but I have to convince you of God first.
Phillip, did I say anything at all about the God of the Bible? Why? Please listen to me, Phillip. Please, I'm begging you. I am so fucking frustrated by people calling in. Shut up.
So bad.
Shut up. Listen. I begged you to please listen to me so that you could make your point. Do you want me to hang up? Is that the goal?
No.
Then listen to me. Shut up and listen, okay? Constantly, people call in and they want to defend a notion of God. What happens is we'll get emails saying, oh, well, you guys didn't define your terms first, so you were talking past each other. I'm trying to make sure that we don't talk past each other. So I want to get to what characteristics of a God you're advocating for. Right now, you have a God that is eternal, infinite, and consciousness. Are there any other properties of God that you are getting ready to argue for?
A non-physical prime mover, not contingent on matter. Do you know what matter is?
Goodbye, you prick.
Material for the universe.
Bye-bye.
All right. I'm tired of people who think they're so smart that they just, oh my God. Do you know what matter is? I know one thing, you don't matter.
Yeah. Okay.
So this will be straightforward. Wade in South Carolina, you're on with Jim and Matt.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
I'm frustrated as hell.
I'm so sorry. Last caller was a little bit strange. Okay, so here's my question. So I've been reading Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape.
Yes.
And I'm an atheist. And I'm not exactly convinced of his argument because, see, I understand that one of our highest wants is our maximal well-being for ourselves. But the question is, like, why should we necessarily care about the well-being of other people? And I've heard people ask you before, Matt, and you said because it's in your own interest.
No.
And I agree with that.
No. If you're asking what is the imperative, what is the should, there is none. There is no should. There is no imperative. It is just, hey, this is in fact in your best interest. Why is that not enough?
Okay.
That it's in your best interest.
It is. So for me, so I might bring up veganism a little bit here.
No, you won't.
The thing is.
No, you won't.
Okay. I won't. So I'm just wondering. So if I'm satisfied with my life right now, and I wrong someone else, and I'm still satisfied with my life, what necessarily moral obligation was there for me to treat that person properly?
I don't understand your question. Whether or not you're satisfied with it, like somebody could run around chopping people's heads off and be satisfied with it. That's independent of whether it is in our best interest, in our well-being. Your personal satisfaction with how you is not the issue.
Okay, so the way I kind of understand morality as a whole might be to maximize well-being of yourself and the community around you. And I think it ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it ultimately boils down to if it maximizes your own well-being, and societal well-being might be important to or vitally important to your own well-being. So
of course it is.
But does that work for most? So like an example, and like correct me if I'm going down the wrong path. For maybe like 200 years ago with slavery, like slave owners may have been content with their life, and their well-being may not be as good as it could be if slavery wasn't instituted. But
Wade, I already answered this. Whether or not they're content with their life or satisfied with their life isn't fucking relevant. Slavery, we now know, is bad for everyone, including the slave owners. In the short term, it looks and feels like they're getting a benefit from it, and they do, but that doesn't mean that their life is actually better. A world that allows individual freedom, because one of your slaves that you don't allow to do anything other than, pick crops and take a beating could be the person that cures the cancer that's going to kill you.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't super satisfied with that, and thank you for your answer. I was looking for your input, so thank you very much.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, Jim. I'm talking too much.
You're having fun, so
yeah, but I want you to have fun. So are you looking at Call-In Studio?
Yeah.
You steer. You steer the calls and the conversation. I will jump in when I just can't stand to not.
Okay. All right. Paul in Michigan. trying to figure out why slavery are wrong under an atheist worldview, and discussing morality is what I've got here. Atheism isn't a worldview. Does that answer your question?
No, I'm not saying that atheism is a worldview. What I'm asking is, if you do not have a moral arbiter, regardless of whether it's a Christian God or some other being, I believe in the Christian God, the Bible. But if there
so you're fine with slavery?
That, what?
So you're fine with slavery then?
No. I'm not fine with slavery, but I do.
The Bible
you're
is
picking your Bible.
The Bible is, and it portrays it as being of God. Can you point to anything in the Bible where God says he's against slavery as opposed to in favor of it?
Well, the question doesn't ask if slavery is wrong or right or wrong from a Christian perspective. The question I'm asking is from your perspective.
I know.
You have no standard.
And what Matt was
you hear
asking
the last
you,
call? Because I answered it during the last call. I literally answered it during the last call, that from purely selfish perspective, and because we know what the impact of slavery is, we know that the world is better off if we don't have slavery.
Right. And your moral arbiter that you're claiming that your morals come from supports slavery according to his book. So I'm not sure that I want to pick your God, the God of the Bible, as a moral arbiter that I'm willing to follow.
Well, here's the reason why I state this. If it is just to my best interest, then there should be nothing wrong with the Israelites holding slaves or any other culture, because every culture thought at that time it was right. So what's your issue with it? That's my question.
That they were wrong.
So not only do we have the issue that here's the thing, Paul.
Yeah.
I explained this in the last call, which you might not have heard. Yes, in the short term, slave owners are convinced that owning slaves is in their best interest, but we know that it doesn't actually produce a better world. It produces a worse world, particularly a worse world for the slaves. You said, essentially that everybody thought it was in their best interest. No, they didn't. The slaves didn't, and they should have known better. But at the end of the day, you know who should have really known better? A God. A God should have known better, and yours didn't, because he doesn't exist.
He does exist.
Prove it.
You would have to disprove Jesus.
No, I don't have to disprove shit. If you say God exists, prove God exists.
Jesus did exist, and to say he didn't exist, and that's who my God is, to say he didn't exist, you would be hard pressed to find evidence to disprove it. Even Bart Ehrman.
No, you're getting the burden of proof wrong. You're making the claim. We're telling you to prove it. We don't have to disprove anything. All we have to do is ask you, prove it. And if you're going to point to the Bible is the claim, not the proof. Okay. So show us your proof.
Okay, well, Josephus, one of the Jewish historians who was totally against Christianity, said that he has verified proof that Jesus existed.
Where's your proof?
No, sir.
Josephus is, yeah.
That's a flat lie. Josephus does not say he has verified proof that Jesus exists. As a matter of fact, in Josephus's work, the one passage that mentions Jesus explicitly is considered to be a forgery, but even that doesn't say he has proof that Jesus existed. You are exaggerating Josephus.
No, it's not considered to be a forgery, even by atheist historians. It
is. The Testimonium Flavium. It is the most contentious passage in there because it breaks the narrative, and it doesn't say he has proof of Jesus. It breaks in the middle of a conversation.
Well, it's not just him, though. It's Typhus.
Okay, no. You came with Josephus. I just countered Josephus. Are you going to acknowledge that what you said about Josephus wasn't true? Or are you just going to move on to the next thing that's not true?
That passage, which was contested, is even by Bart Ehrman and many other historians.
I don't give a fuck what Bart Ehrman says. I know the man. I've moderated debates with him. What Bart Ehrman says is irrelevant. Bart Ehrman could be wrong, couldn't he?
He could be, yes.
No, stop citing people as if they are authorities and if they should be, this is true because an authority said so, because that is a fallacy.
Okay. Well, then let's take the gospel writers.
Who are they?
We used to believe, as far as you know, by early tradition,
Paul.
the book of Mark was written by John Mark and is the
Paul
stated by Peter. Yeah.
Paul. The Gospels are anonymous and unsigned. We have no idea who wrote them. It's a matter of church tradition that certain names were appointed to them. We have no idea who wrote them, nor do we have any good reason to think they were eyewitnesses.
We have ideas.
No, we don't.
Matthew was written. We have good reason to believe that Matthew was written by Matthew.
No, we don't.
No.
Here, let me open a Bible for you since you don't seem to be capable of opening and reading it. But on the very first page of the Bible here.
Right in front of me.
Okay.
Yes.
So does your Bible include information about authorship? Because there is no known author. We don't know who the author is for Matthew. It doesn't say, it's not signed. We have no original copies, and it almost certainly isn't an eyewitness testimony.
You're right. We don't have any original copies of the books of Matthew, Mark, or Luke.
Or anything in the Bible. We have no originals for anything in the Bible.
You know. No, here's what we do know. We do know that John was actually originally thought to have been written in the 200s, the 2nd century. But we did find a poster stamp size manuscript of John 18 that was dated to be about 90 to 150, somewhere in there.
Right. You can go to earlychristianwritings.com and get all of this information. But the one thing it'll also tell you is that we don't know who the authors are. So stop saying we do.
Okay, I'll give you according to church tradition, but we have very strong belief that these authors, the ones that are claimed, are the original authors.
There is no
evidence.
Wow.
The manuscript.
I'm going to shut up now, Paul, and I'm not going to say another word. This is between you and Jim, because you want to cite Bart Ehrman when it's convenient and ignore him because he would tell you that the Gospels are anonymous, no originals. We have no idea who wrote them. I don't care what church tradition says. And I don't care if you produced the author of the Gospel of Mark, marched him into my room, and he said that he was an eyewitness and told me that would not be sufficient evidence to conclude that Jesus is divine or that there is a God. So you're trying to accomplish something that even if you marched the person in here, you could not accomplish. And you're trying to do it with anonymous copies of translations of copies that we know have been altered.
We know where the alterations happen. We know where the...
No, we don't, sir. You cannot know that if you don't have an original, which you already acknowledged we have originals for none of it. So you can't know.
We have 53,000, we have 500, over 5,000 copies of the New Testament alone. Manuscripts.
Complete copies and 5,000 is what you're claiming.
There's more than that.
Is the original.
There's more than that. There's more than that produced every fucking year. You have no originals, and so you can't say how much the versions that you have are different from the originals, can you?
We can recreate from what we have that we know.
How do you recreate something that may have been modified back to the original without knowing what the modifications are?
Because if I have, let's say I write something down, right?
Uh-huh.
Or let's say we find a piece, we get it originally. You and I both write down a copy of Plato's writings, right?
What do we write it down from, Paul?
Mistake.
What do we write it down from? What are we basing it on?
We're copying Plato's student. Okay.
We don't have the original?
Student.
We don't have the original?
He's doing a hypothetical, Matt. So hypothetically, you and I...
Hypothetically, why would God want you to do hypotheticals and try to piece things together? Why hasn't God preserved his word like he said he would?
Yes, he has. That's
He has not. He has not. The fact
we don't
that you're
have
trying
originals.
to from copies of copies means that God did not preserve it, did he?
No, it does not mean that. What it means is that he didn't want us to worship those pages like we do.
Oh, this argument again. No, so yeah, here's until you have the originals, you cannot, from copies that have errors, recreate the original. The only thing you can say is, here are the oldest copies that we have, and here are where they differ. But what you don't know is are those copies of copies, how many copies between the oldest copy you have and the original were there? And if you don't know that, you can't recreate the original at all. And, you know, once you start making changes, and you're constantly making changes to this text, at what point does that text become a completely new text?
I would agree with you if that were the case. It's not like a case of telephone. Sure
it is. Do you know why it's a case of telephone? What was the most common way of exchanging information or telling people about their ancestors before they started writing stuff down?
Oral tradition, yeah.
Yeah, and guess what? That's telephone. So before you even get to writing things down, you have an oral tradition. In fact, you have an oral tradition from the days of Jesus Christ until the stuff got written down. And so you have a game of telephone happening before you even write stuff down. So even if you could produce an original, unless that original was written by one of the direct apostles, then you have problems with eyewitness testimony, which you should probably go investigate, because eyewitness testimony is probably the worst form of testimony you could possibly have. So you're still got problems.
Well, here's the issue though. We know that the earliest manuscripts that we have of John date somewhere to between 90 and 150 AD.
Which is a generation after, and is written from the oral tradition, which is a game of telephone. So even if you can produce the original, we don't know that was the original eyewitness testimony.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. How do we know about Plato?
Oh, from the writings. That's all we know about him.
Okay.
And other people's writings about him.
Who wrote down the writings about Plato?
His students and other people. But again, this doesn't. So again, we're not debating. We don't have to debate whether or not a man named Jesus actually existed. But what we are debating is whether or not the supernatural elements of his existence actually happened. So if somebody all of a sudden started saying that Plato rode a horse into heaven, I'd have a problem with that. Right? We're not debating whether or not Jesus actually exists. We're debating whether or not Jesus had any supernatural abilities. And guess what? You can't do that from the originals. But we also can't necessarily say that there was one Jesus. There may have been several people who got lumped into this one character, which happens a lot in the oral tradition. So even, again, we go back to, once you've got these oral traditions and you start writing about them, you don't have the original, and therefore we don't have eyewitnesses, and therefore all of your testimony, all of your evidence is suspect, because we only have the eyewitnesses that are in the supposed eyewitnesses that are in the Bible. With Plato, we have enough people writing about him and enough students writing about him to conclude he probably existed.
But
notice
even if you
the word probably.
Who cares? Nobody is saying you need to believe in Plato because he's magical and will save you from eternity. So it's irrelevant. Plato could be a fiction, and it wouldn't change a thing, because what I judge about Plato is his words, the words that are attributed to him, whether he's real or not. Just like I can judge Voldemort's words, whether he's real or not, and I can judge Jesus's words, whether he's real or not, and I can judge a God's word, whether he's real or not. I'm not advocating for Plato or for being a servant of Plato. You're coming here and suggesting that there is a God that you can't prove, that the Bible is evidence of it when you have no originals. You don't have a path to show.
But let me ask you, when did oral traditions cease and written tradition?
Oral traditions have never ceased. What difference does it make when oral traditions ceased? Do you have?
Because the written down translations, the written down tradition started back before the time of Jesus, correct?
Correct. There are books and writings before Jesus, including the Dead Sea Scrolls. What difference does it make?
Okay, so oral. So then you're. It doesn't matter whether oral tradition was good or not. Who says that someone was not there writing down? You know, I'm not saying they weren't.
Because all of the writings come from oral tradition. So if oral tradition isn't good enough to transmit actual facts, and it isn't, then what good are the written traditions based on the oral?
Okay. Well, yeah.
It doesn't matter if Jesus himself
correct.
wrote a gospel, signed it, cut his finger, put his own blood stamp on it. None of that would prove that Jesus was fucking magical, would it?
No, and I'm not saying he's magical. I'm saying he's.
You don't think Jesus is magical?
The point of Scripture.
You don't think Jesus is magical? How do you turn water into wine? How do you raise the dead? How do you walk on water? That's magic.
That's divine. No, man.
Okay, fine. Stop, Paul. If Jesus himself wrote a gospel, signed it, put a magical photograph on it, and stamped it with his blood, that doesn't mean he's divine. Doesn't mean anything in that is actually true, does it?
The resurrection means that he's divine.
You have Paul. Why can you not answer the question that I ask? Why is it that every time I have a conversation with a theist, they refuse to answer the question I ask? If Jesus himself wrote a gospel and signed it in blood, does that mean that what that gospel says is in fact true?
No.
I couldn't understand. Was that a no or a yes?
It was a no.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. It's not make it true.
Hang on.
Proof.
Hang on.
Okay.
You just admitted that even if Jesus wrote a gospel, signed it blood, that wouldn't mean that what the gospel says is true. So what evidence do we have that the gospels are true?
We have the historical manuscripts. We can recreate the life.
No, you can't recreate the originals.
You can't recreate anything. So when I asked you, even if Jesus himself wrote it down, that wouldn't mean it's true. And when I ask you what evidence you have, you go point to other people's writings that are not firsthand that also would not be true, right? Where is the evidence?
What would you be looking for? Because the evidence that I have is Jesus' sayings that he would die and rise from the dead.
You have no evidence that Jesus actually said that or that he actually did it. What you have is a story. Where is the evidence?
And that's the thing. We have the manuscripts, enough manuscripts to recreate and to prove that Jesus didn't.
No, you don't. That's not the way
we've been over
works.
this.
You don't just stack up anecdotes and come up with a proof. No matter if everybody on the planet, Paul, if everybody on the planet right now, except for me, was convinced that they had experienced God, does that mean they're right and I'm wrong?
No.
Okay, so now we're in a situation. This is perfect. I'm literally the only person on the planet in this fictional scenario that does not believe in God. You cannot come to me and say, he believed in God, he believed in God, he believed in God, he believed in God, because none of that should convince me, right? Shouldn't convince anybody.
You're absolutely right.
Good.
You're
then,
absolutely right.
Then what you're saying is you have no evidence. You have nothing that should convince anyone. Because all you keep pointing to,
what I'm saying
is testimony.
And here's the thing: when you're dealing with historical evidence, that's pretty much all you have is testimony for anybody, including George Washington or any,
Paul,
yeah.
Listen very carefully. I'm trying to help you out. You just said that this is the way historical evidence works, that this is the most you have. However, that's true for historical evidence in general. But could God present evidence right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And stop whining and pretending that we only have the historical evidence. If God is in fact real, God should be able to demonstrate it right now. Why doesn't God do that?
Well, he does. He does.
No, he doesn't.
This is the thing. I didn't want to bring up anecdotal evidence or evidence from
Anecdotal? I think you mean anecdotal, which is all we've been talking about for the entirety of this call.
But here's the thing. No, I don't want to bring out personal experiences. I could tell you my testimonies of why.
I'm not interested in your testimony. We've already agreed that shouldn't convince anybody. I asked you why God doesn't prove it. You want to pretend that this is just, this is where we're stuck at because, it's the way history works. We only have copies of copies. We don't have anything. If there were a God, God could provide original manuscripts to everybody on the planet right now. God would be smart enough to know that he shouldn't be providing manuscripts at all because the written word is not anywhere near as strong as God showing up and talking to everyone right now. And you think that your God wants you to piece together a story and make it seem reasonable. Why doesn't God just fucking prove it?
He did. Jesus came 2,000 years ago.
No, sir. You don't.
You're making a claim. We're asking for evidence. We keep going over the same thing, right? It's just over and over again. You keep going back to the Bible, and we keep telling you the Bible is the claim, not the evidence. And then we discuss why it's the claim and not the evidence, because you've got a bunch of manuscripts for which we do not have the original. We cannot recreate the original from the changes. And all of those originals are done after the fact and are part of an oral tradition, which gets us into serious problems. So again, where is your evidence? Quit pointing to the Bible. Quit talking about the Bible. Don't mention the Bible again. Give us your evidence.
Okay.
What I asked was, why doesn't God prove it right now?
Yeah. Why doesn't he prove it right now?
How many times can I say the same question? And yes, that's the question.
He does prove it right now. He does prove himself.
How?
I've seen miracles done in his name.
What miracle have you seen done, and how do you know that it came from a God?
I broke my back in 5 places and walked to the hospital 2 days later after we prayed about it. No pain. I had pain, but no crutch.
You broke your back in 5 places. You broke your back in 5 places. And you walked out of the hospital 2 days later because you prayed. Did the doctors treat you at all?
Other than pain medication, no.
And your back just healed. And you have the x-rays to prove, like you walked in, here's 5 breaks, and 2 days later the breaks were just gone?
Yeah.
You have the x-rays from when you walked in with 5 broken.
I have the x-rays of the break. I don't.
What's that?
I have the x-rays of the break, if that's what you want to see, yes.
You have the x-rays from 2 days later when the breaks are all gone?
No, I don't have x-rays.
You don't even have the beginnings of a hope of a wisp of a miracle. And let's say, for example, that you walked in with 5 broken bones in your back, and 2 days later you walked out. How do you know that God did that?
Because of my faith in him, because I believe that.
I don't give a shit about faith. I'm asking about evidence. You don't get to cite, here's God's proof, he healed me of a broken back, because that's not the true story. The true story is you think God healed you from a broken back, but you cannot demonstrate that.
Not to your satisfaction.
Not to reasonable satisfaction. Only a faith head who just believes whatever they already believe would accept that. The rest of us want evidence. Why won't God? And by the way, my question, sir, was why won't God prove it now? You claim he did, which is not now, that's past. You claim he does, and you have a backstory that you cannot prove and you cannot tie to God. So answer my real question. Why won't God prove it right now?
Because maybe the proof that he would bring, you wouldn't even buy it. I mean, Jesus,
that's a load of shit. You're speculating. Why won't God prove it?
I am speculating, but if you, for instance, Luke 16, Jesus gives the parable of Lazarus and the rich.
Goodbye, sir. I'm done.
Yeah, just back to.
I don't need another fucking Bible verse ever.
Yeah. You and me both. Back to the Bible, and I told him not to mention it again.
Yeah, it's like I'm starting to think I'm going to have to define what the word now means.
Yeah, which is kind of sad, but that appears to be the state of education. So 35?
Sure.
All right.
But
Veria in the UK? How do you pronounce your name?
Oh, hello. It's Veria.
Veria, okay.
It's from Latin, old Persian name, from veritas, truth. I'm an atheist, and I would like to share something with you. I really would like to know what you think about this. I recently had a debate with a friend who's a theist, and he was trying to justify that believing in some sort of a supernatural can be not rational. I mean, you can say that it can be rational. So you can't say just it's irrational and you don't have the means to do that. And his example was, I don't know if Matt agrees with this, but his starting point was from logical absolutes. I know that Matt has had this debate with the other guy who I can't remember, and I'm not going through his line of argument, but the whole argument was that if we believe in A equals A, just because it's always been true through the whole history of human life, then it's a form of faith that we have in it, because we've never seen it to be A is not equal to A.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different definitions of faith. Generally speaking,
yes,
theists like to use it as faith means confidence in the absolute absence of certainty. But that's true of everything, because I don't think that we have certainty about anything, yet we can have confidence in many things. Faith being the evidence, as in as Hebrews 11:1 says, that's a different thing. But the A equals A, we see positive evidence for that all the time. The only thing we can't do is show that it is necessarily always true. It is a presupposition that we have to accept that reason is reasonable. But it's not like we're believing something without evidence. What we have is a pattern that has never been violated. And the instant that it is violated, the instant that we can show that something violates this, then we stop accepting it. So our acceptance of it is tentative based on further information.
So we can test the A equals A in this world. So, and we haven't found any case against it. Therefore, I mean, I agree that it's a rational belief. But if we believe in afterlife, well, we agree that we can't disprove this belief.
No. I think we can disprove this belief. I think that the soul, the notion of a soul, which is an essential component of an afterlife, is the most obviously flawed aspect of theology. There is not only is there zero evidence that anything that makes me survives my death. We don't have an example of a consciousness absent a brain, and everything about me is malleable. When you suffer brain damage or do something else, you can change my likes, my preferences, my memories, everything. And so all the evidence points to when I'm dead, it's over. No evidence points to, hey, there's an afterlife, because the components that people attribute to a soul are identifiable functions of the brain. The only component of a soul that is not an identifiable function of a brain, as far as I'm aware, is that it can exist outside the body. And that's never been proven. So the only thing about a soul that isn't a brain is something that can't be proven.
I agree. Right. That there is no evidence for soul, but he was mostly thinking of being rational in justifying, in believing in an afterlife, because if, let's say, there is a case of, we actually brought up this example by Matrix, that when you believe that you're in the Matrix, then you can break the laws, and then you can jump. But if you know that you're still in the Matrix, but you don't actually truly believe it, you can't jump. So therefore, if in your life you truly believe that there is an afterlife, then you can have this transformation, like your consciousness can go through this phase. Exactly.
This is a load of speculative bullshit, which is why that we're using the Matrix. Just to say, oh well, maybe there's an afterlife and we don't know yet. And maybe when you get to the point where you can experience an afterlife, then you're done here, which is why there's no evidence for it. Okay, that's called a post hoc rationalization. That's not rational. It's not reasonable. What is the evidence for an afterlife?
Of course, yes. I mean, that's how I think. It's just as you know, as an atheist, I truly want to be honest with the arguments that I hear, and I truly thought that if A equals A, we take it on faith, and
we don't take it on faith. Faith is not the same as a necessary presupposition that is backed by all the evidence. Like every bit of evidence we have ever been able to examine conforms perfectly to A equals A. It's not just something we pulled out of our ass. It is a reasonable presupposition. We just cannot prove that it is absolute and inviolate.
All right. And if we did, then we would have to change the way we think about almost everything.
See, I don't know what you mean by saying if we accept A equals A, then also we could accept an afterlife and can be considered rational. Because
the reason I thought that we can accept afterlife if we accept A equals A is that the whole process of this proposition to be true, that there is an afterlife, this proposition, the whole process to be true is that I have to live my life, and then after it's finished, then I experience afterlife and no one else can. Therefore,
whoa. What the hell makes you think that's the definition of an afterlife?
I don't think he was actually arguing for a god or an afterlife that soul exists in it, or it was some sort of, existence of consciousness in some other form. I think.
Consciousness in what other form? Because all consciousness we have is directly linked to the meat that sits in between our ears.
Yes, but I think you can actually link it to philosophical skepticism that if this reality, if we truly believe that there can be another reality, it's like living in a matrix. So if you
no, sir. The fact that you believe there could be another reality has no bearing on whether or not there is another reality, correct?
Yes, of course, yes.
So why would you say that because we can believe in another reality, it does?
It's not that I choose to believe that, but those people who believe in it.
I don't care about people who believe in it. You aren't calling about whether or not a belief in the afterlife is rational. I'm trying to figure out how there could be a rational belief in the afterlife.
Yeah. That's the argument I was thinking of, that if a theist brings up this argument, is that a valid argument for being rational? So I can accuse someone of being irrational if you believed in the Quran or, the Bible, because I can bring up lots of evidence that these books can be false. But if someone believes in something that I can never disprove in this life...
if it's unfalsifiable, one cannot have a rational belief about it. By definition, an unfalsifiable proposition is one for which there cannot be a rational position other than it is unfalsifiable, and therefore I'm not going to take up a position.
Yes, that's correct. So yes, if something is unfalsifiable, so it's irrational to believe in it, yes.
Yeah. Because basically, if something's unfalsifiable, that means there's no way to prove it's wrong. And so now you're saying, I'm going to believe something, and there's no way you can prove me wrong. But you also can't be proven right. And so if it's not falsifiable...
Yes, I know about burden of proof, and you talk about it all the time. So I thought probably this was a bit different from the burden of proof, because they claim about something that can never be tested. A equals A can never be tested in this.
A equals A can be tested. It's just not necessarily falsifiable that A equals A absolutely in an inviolate sense, which is not what we're advocating. Science, by the way, isn't proclamations of truth. It is tentative propositions that are subject to revision.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I think all our epistemology, all our logic is based on A equals A, or on these logical absolutes. So when we are being rational, we are actually appealing to the first truth that we appeal to. Do you agree with that?
I don't even know what you mean. When we're being rational, we appeal to the first truth that we appeal to? What's that mean?
chain of reasonings, a chain of, probably thousands, the chain of reasonings that they go down to the first true proposition that we've accepted, which is A equals A. I think that's where the rationality comes from.
Right. We have all kinds of evidence that A equals A is true. So far, every attempt to prove it is untrue has failed. And if it ever was, and so it's descriptive of the world that we see around us, not prescriptive of the world that we see around us. So I'm not seeing where you're getting that that accepting is true that A equals A is the same as accepting is true that there is an afterlife, because we have evidence that A equals A is true and that A equals B does not appear to be true in any meaningful way that we've found so far. So I don't know how you're equating this to an afterlife for which we don't even begin to have a way to look at something, right? I can take two objects and go, these two objects are not the same, right? But this object is itself, so A equals A. I can look at that and do that. How do I do that with something like the afterlife? How do I even know that anything of me exists after I die, given that all the evidence we have today says that everything that is me is based on the meat, based on my physical body. And if I take damage to my brain, if I get cancer, if I get a disease, I can actually alter me fundamentally in ways that nobody would recognize, including EKG machines. So I have all of this evidence, but I have absolutely none for afterlife. And now you're trying to base, this belief in something we have zero evidence for to something that we have a metric ton of evidence for at the very least. So how are you getting from no evidence to the same as everything we've observed about the world?
Yeah, I guess there is something wrong with this argument, the argument that I'm making. I'm just trying to find the fallacy there. But I think falsification was a correct point, and thank you for the points that you...
Well, the fallacy here is that A equals A is a presupposition. It is a necessary presupposition that serves as the foundation of reason. We have mountains of evidence for it, and if at any time it's demonstrated that it's not inviolate, then we will take that into account. But for now, it's reasonable to continue acting as if it applies everywhere all the time. I don't think that any of the things that I just used to describe A equals A apply in any way at all to a notion of an afterlife. It's not a necessary presupposition. It doesn't have mountains of evidence supporting it. It's not something we need to assume for other reasons. It is not something that continues to reprove itself that it is reliable. It is the exact opposite of that. Until such time as there is evidence for it, how could anyone rationally believe it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks for the time, and really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Veria.
Bye.
By the way, I can keep going with other calls if you want to. My mood has improved.
Okay.
I understand. I get it. I've been putting people in timeout because I can't hate looking at chat and having people say, "Oh, well, you should do the show this way, or you should do this," because also they're on a delay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in a good mood now.
Okay, good. Then we're going to go to helps to click the link to Sammy in England, who says that you have experience with supernatural entities, jinn, who are mischievous beings made of fire. Oh, cool.
Can't wait.
Oh, good God. I did not think that I would actually get on the show. I was like, no, it's the end. I didn't know how much rejection I could take today, but thank you. Thank you for taking my call.
So what have you experienced, and how can we verify this?
Okay. So I get the feeling you don't place too much stock in personal experience. So no, you can't verify it, but this is my experience. And have you ever seen the show Supernatural?
Sammy,
yes.
If we can't verify it, why should we bother listening?
Because it's interesting, and
It's not interesting. It's not interesting to me. I have no reason to believe in anything supernatural. I've read countless reports that have been compiled over thousands of years of people claiming supernatural stuff, and every single one of them, some of them claim that they can demonstrate it. You're acknowledging at the outset that you can't demonstrate it. So I can go watch science fiction. I can go watch fantasy. I can go watch things about ghosts and spirits that are clearly fictional. I can even watch the fraudulent ghost hunters on TV doing that stuff. But if you've got a story about how you experience supernatural things and we can't verify it, let me ask this then. How did you verify that what you experienced was actually supernatural?
Because it totally defies the natural. And
what do you mean totally defies the natural?
Well,
do you have some expertise in what the natural world can and cannot produce?
A disembodied mind.
A disembodied mind? So what did you experience?
Yeah, no, a disembodied mind. Okay, so I was 13, and between the ages of 13 and 21, I was tormented by this entity. And my first experience with it was I got up in the middle of the night, and I saw this tall figure just standing in the corner of the room. And it wouldn't be until years later that I actually knew what this was. At the time, I was just freaking out. And it was about 6 feet 8 inches tall, had a hood, white hands, and it literally pulled me out of my body so that I was drifting towards it. And
okay, so let me back up real quick. You mentioned that the show Supernatural. Had you just watched the show and it had a jinn in it?
No, Jim.
How do you know that you were pulled out of your body? How do you know this wasn't a dream, a hallucination, a mental aberration? How did you rule out naturalistic explanations?
These occurred consistently over the course of 7 years.
That is not remotely in the ballpark of an answer to my question. You've already told me that it took place over 7 years. I asked, how did you rule out mental health issues, mental aberrations, environmental conditions, sleep, dreams, anything that would be a natural explanation? How did you rule those out?
It just seems too consistent to be an aberration of the mind.
So your answer is that you didn't bother to rule it out. You just went with your gut and it seems supernatural, so you concluded it was. That is by definition irrational. Not only have you presented something that we can't verify, but you're acknowledging that you didn't bother to verify it either. And so now I'm even less interested.
Yeah.
Oh, Matt. Well, I think it would be an interesting story if you let me go on.
And yet I don't.
No,
and
I can.
I don't either.
Yeah,
we have one.
You did it before I did.
Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
We're both steering. No. I'm going to get my hands off the wheel. I promise.
No, you're fine. All right. Yeah, let's go to Mark in California, who has evidence for creation and intelligent design. All right, what's your evidence?
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, Mark, what's your evidence?
Well, I think the evidence is what I would start with is even though we do not actually see the creator, we can see the evidence of creation. Similarly, when we see a painting that was painted,
you're going to go from the argument from design, correct?
Yeah, do you know how we know that a painting was painted? You don't get to just call something a painting. Like if a bunch of paint falls off of and creates a mess on the floor, is that a painting?
Well, I'm talking about, let's say, like a Rembrandt or something.
Why can't you answer the question that I asked?
Somebody, I mean, it just didn't fall into.
Why won't you answer the question that I fucking asked? I'm going somewhere.
Rude.
I'm trying to be helpful.
You don't have to be rude just because I got you on the spot.
You don't got. You think you got me on the spot?
Why don't have either one of us on the spot?
Question. If a bunch of buckets of paint that were stacked up fall down and get paint all over the floor, is that a painting?
Yes, it's a painting, but it's not.
I'm done. Then I'm done because that painting didn't require a painter. So you just defeated your own fucking argument. Got me on the spot.
I'm not done. I'm not.
You are done.
Yeah, so you are done. So because the problem is you're just making an argument from design. And the problem is in order to know when something has been designed or made, we must have something else to compare it to that has not been made or designed. That is the only way we can do that. So where is the other universe that has not been designed that we can compare this one to?
What, can you repeat that question?
Where is the other universe you are using that has not been designed to compare to this one to prove that this one is designed?
I'm not aware of any other universes, sir.
There you go. You're done.
Right.
Because you cannot, under any circumstances, prove that something has been designed without looking at things that have not been designed. And we can see this in evidence in places. There's a series of granite steps near Japan that's underwater. And people thought these were giant steps until geologists got in there and said, no, this is the way that granite breaks when it's under this type of pressure, and these types of things happen, and it happens to look like steps. So even when we compare things that happen naturally to things that we know are designed like steps, we can still be wrong. So you have to have something to compare it to. And if you have nothing to compare it to, then how do you know something has been designed? Because your example of a painting is exactly that. We know when something is a painting because we compare it to things that have not been painted.
We recognize design not by its complexity, and in many cases by its simplicity, because simplicity and efficiency is a hallmark of intentional design. But we recognize design by contrasting it with things that aren't designed. And there's another aspect to this, which is when we have a painting, we don't get to call it a painting until we have evidence that it was in fact painted. So what we have is, we have something like the Mona Lisa. All available evidence shows that only occurs when an intelligent agent does that a Mona Lisa, something of that, the design qualities of that, does not occur naturally. All of the evidence points to it being created. No evidence points to it not being created. When we look at the world, when we look at trees, all of the evidence points to those things being natural. There's no evidence for a creator. And so if you go out and you walk along a river after a storm, and there's a whole bunch of sticks that are blocking up that river, how do you tell whether that was an accident of nature or if it was a beaver dam that was intentionally constructed by a beaver?
True.
I mean, no, that's a question. That's how can you tell the difference between a bunch of sticks that formed a dam?
It's difficult to tell the difference if you didn't know how beavers built dams.
So you compare it to an existing beaver dam.
You would compare it to a beaver dam, right? To see if this thing has the hallmarks of a beaver dam, right?
Right.
Yeah, so you need something to compare it to. So what have you compared anything to in order to determine that a God did it?
Well, I didn't say it was God. I said a created design.
Whatever
you want to label it in your absolute utter dishonesty. Whatever you want to label it. And by the way, the God you believe in, you think he's going to be proud of you ducking the God label in order to make some abstract...
Can I speak another one of my points? Because you're just trying to...
No, you don't get to make another point. You made one point. It was shit. We've explained why it was shit, and we asked you questions about it. What do you have to compare something to show whether it's created or not?
A response for the painting. How about, what is your response for...
I'm not here to respond to you over and over again 10 minutes after the show's supposed to end. You come with your A game, and when your A game gets demolished, we move on to another caller.
Yeah. And we do it just like this.
I guarantee you. Now, we get feedback all the time. I'm going to take a minute here because I talked more than anybody today. I talked more than Jim today. Yes, I'm in a mood, and yes, I was taking no shit in chat and no shit here. I'll clarify all this. If you go back and you review the calls that have happened on this show, the only time that things start to get heated is when the other person is failing to respond to the questions we've asked. We've done this for a long time. And these questions, I'm trying to take the most efficient path so that I don't have to spend 40 minutes going in loops with one caller. I'd like for calls to take 5 to 10 minutes because that's really all that we need for most of this, because it's not like we've got expert apologists calling. Today was a train wreck of bad arguments across the board. Well, we know the Gospels are reliable, or we don't have originals, but we can kind of imagine what the originals would be like, or you got to rely on logic, and therefore there's this. It was just one, and it would all of them. Neither of us needed to be here. I could have taken a day off, and Jim could have demolished all those. Jim could have taken the day off. I could have demolished all those. If you are a theist, please, if you believe nothing else I ever say, which I'm sure most of you don't, if you're a theist, I genuinely would love to have a conversation with you about why you believe. But I have zero fucks left and zero patience left for people who are not going to argue honestly, for people who aren't going to ask the question that's put in front of them. Because if you just flit around, if you just dance around, and say, oh, well, you knocked down that argument, let me give you another argument. No, that's not the way this works. You don't get, oh, well, gosh, that one didn't stump you. Maybe I can come up with one that stumps you. Is that your hope, to present argument after argument until you find one that stumps us? And then when you do stump us, because you will, Jim and I don't know everything. There's lots of shit we're fucking clueless about. You're going to stump us one day. And if you call in and stump us and leave thinking that you have A, demonstrated that you're rational, you're wrong. B, demonstrated that a God exists, you're wrong. Us being stumped is not the end goal. What should be the end goal is clarity of what is actually being claimed. If you want to call in to say you've had supernatural experiences, and then you say, you guys can't verify it, and I didn't bother to verify it either, how is that any different from somebody who's just saying, hey, here's a cool story?
Yeah, and I've had what could be considered by some people as supernatural experience myself. I don't consider it that, and I would love for someone to give me some reason why I should. But honestly, the most we can come up with is I don't know what happened. All I know is that the laws of the way electronics work should not have caused the radar to rotate backward and make a really weird grinding noise. But not only did I witness that, but the guy I was working with on that radar was there, and all of his students were there, and the instructors were there, and we all went over that radar. And it's still, after my friend walked up, said something in vaguely Latin and waved his hands, turned the radar on, it rotated backward and made a really, really strange grinding noise. We immediately turned it off, and it never did it again. But there was no reason for any of that. Was that supernatural? Because he said he was going to cause our radar to be possessed, and he said something in some weird pseudo language and then waved his hands? I don't know. Is that supernatural? No.
There are. We don't just have like one or two lines. There are, I don't know how many we have open. It's like 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. And there are 5,800 plus people watching this live, and hundreds of thousands that are going to watch it in the future. I don't want to waste their time. Do you think that I want to come in here and explain slavery over and over and over? In the past 3 weeks, there have been 2 different people calling in to say, Matt's wrong about what the Bible says in slavery. And what's happened both times? This time I had him read it out of his Bible, and you could hear him going, wow. I was so focused on what I thought I understood about Exodus 21 that I didn't even look at Leviticus 25. Now, the point of the show, for the people who are asking, isn't necessarily to change the mind of the person who's on the phone. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy when it happens. It has happened. It doesn't tend to happen over the course of a conversation. Purpose of the show is to have the conversations and to teach how to debunk arguments and everything else. Now, is there a better way? Yeah, that's why there's a bunch of us on the show. That's why, Jenna and Shannon and Jim are all going to take a different approach than me. So, yeah, today I had a bad day. And I acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge that it was exacerbated by the fact that it was just one bad argument after another, but not just a bad argument. I've been hosting the show for 15 years plus. I've heard all the bad arguments. Jim hasn't been on very long, and he's heard all the bad arguments. He heard all the bad arguments before Jim and I ever met.
Yep, because I watched the show.
This is nothing new. But if I repeatedly try saying, no, wait, I'm trying to ask a question to help you out, because I don't want, my goal is not to embarrass people. My goal is not to have a bunch of clips out on the internet of Dillahunty Pone's theistic, noob or dipshit or whatever else that they're being labeled as clickbait. I genuinely would rather not be wrong about this God thing or the supernatural thing or anything else. I don't think I am, but I'm going to keep having the conversations. And if there's a bad argument, I'm going to say it's a bad argument. If somebody, oh my God, Matt hung up on me. Well, boo-hoo. Oh my God, Matt didn't let me finish. Yes, because you were wasting time. Now, you can think that you had me on the spot and you were about to get the final blow, like, checkmate, atheist, and raw, and I got you. And if that's the way you look at this, you probably shouldn't call it all. I don't look at debates as WWE events. I look at them as ways to educate. Am I always going to do it in the right way with the right mood? Nah, I'm going to fuck up. I fucked up some today. I'm going to do it repeatedly. But please, if you're calling in as a theist, I will be happy to have an hour-long conversation with one theist who could actually sit there and answer questions honestly. And I've done it, and I've done it repeatedly, and that's what the evidence shows. And there's more evidence for that than there is for an afterlife or anything else. Now, to the last thing, and then I got to let people go, because we have a wonderful, wonderful crew, some of whom were sitting there going, maybe Matt should, I'm guessing in their heads. They're like, this isn't going well. Or some others were going, this is going great. But put the crew up, because they had to sit here through all of this, screen calls, monitor tech issues, moderate stuff in chat. If you don't like me, or you don't like me when I'm on the show, and I know that that's always going to be the case, cool. Watch another time. But love those people and contribute to help those people, because they're going to be continuing to do this long after I'm gone. And I don't know how many, whether it's another 15 years or so that I'll be doing this, or maybe forever, or somebody kills me in a week, a month, a year, whatever. I do what I do. And right now we have a show where I'm the main host, and then Jim and Jenna and Shannon are co-hosts. I love all of them dearly. They're great. But that changes. There may be new additions to the show, and there's some other things that we're looking at as well. Including maybe I'll just get drunk one day and do. No, I'm kidding. I'm not. I don't like to get drunk, and I wouldn't like to do the show drunk. But no matter what anybody thinks about anything else, please follow the safety guidelines in your area. Don't forget that we are still in the middle of a global pandemic. We are setting new records for infections, new records for 7-day averages of deaths. We have crossed new lines that back in April, we thought it was bad, and we're twice as bad on, and more in some cases, on all of those things. I know that people traveled over Thanksgiving. I know that people took risks over Thanksgiving. I know that they're going to do it over Christmas and New Year's. Please, over the next few weeks, take every precaution you reasonably can, because it's not getting safer. And the fact that there's a vaccine that's coming doesn't mean that that's going to change things immediately or soon. And I would like, including the people that I timed out or blocked, or, because I do that, I'm still happy to have a conversation, an email, whatever. I would like for all of you to live and come back and watch a show and offer your thoughts and offer corrections. But I don't know. It's been an incredibly stressful year. And as we come in to the finale of this year, there are so many great things that happened with regard to the atheist community of Austin, not the least of which is change in leadership, change in structure, the ability we've learned that we have the ability to have the show with everyone being remote, and it can still be a really good show. I genuinely want that to continue. I want people to enjoy this. I want people to learn. I'd like for us to change minds, but mostly live and be happy. That's it. That's all I got. Do what you can.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Wide awake.